your fresh and unbiased voice in American politics. Hey guys, welcome to another video, Purple Political Talk here. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the final 2020 presidential results, or nearing final 2020 presidential election results, and take a look of how this election turned out to be. Why the results that we have ended up being the results that really defined this election. And truly, what gave former Vice President Joe Biden the victory during this surprisingly close election. So before we get started, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. So let's get started. At this point in time, as we still do have some votes outstanding in the states of North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Alaska, that these states have not been called either because we have a big amounts of votes missing, like in Alaska, or like in North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, where the margins are so tight, and the other party who might be losing the state has a lot of votes outstanding in certain regions of the state where decision desk from all these big major news sources might expect to turn out heavily for that party. So that is what we still have races uncalled. And we're going to get into these uncalled races. But the first thing we really have to talk about is with the states that currently have been projected, how has Biden reached the 270 electoral votes necessary to win? So as of what we have right now, everything else left on the map that still is yet to call were states that Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. Hillary Clinton's map from 2016 was called earlier on, with the exception of Nevada, which was called pretty later on in perspective to this election. But truly, we know that Biden wins right now because he took over the Rust Belt in Wisconsin, where he now leads by a little bit less of a comfortable margin that the Biden campaign hoped. Going into this election, in the Rust Belt in Wisconsin, they expected to win by around 5 or 6 points. They ended up winning by less than almost 6 points. Again, the margins were narrow. In Michigan, we saw the Democrats perform very, very well with almost a nearing 2.5 point lead there. However, it's still closer. They're expected to win here by 8 points. And in Pennsylvania, votes are still being counted, but 49 to 49.7. Again, very narrow margins right there for former Vice President Biden. A lot more narrow than a lot of people think or thought coming into this election. And I will tell you this. Looking at the results we have now, just noticing that he has 279 electoral votes plus that one electoral vote from Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, I think it becomes clear to understand that this election was more of a Biden narrow victory as we have right now. He is expected to carry Georgia. He's expected to carry Arizona. So he might be in the range of right now 306 electoral votes, if I'm correct. That might be the margin. I think I might be wrong with my math there, but I think, yeah, that's what it's looking like. 306 electoral votes. Again, that's very ironic as President Trump won in 2016 with 306 electoral votes. And I will say this. With the current electoral map we have right now, this electoral map by no means is what we were expecting before election night. Based on polls, based on previous results, who would have thought that a state like Florida would vote at this point in time almost, 3 points to the right of Georgia? That really did not seem very possible going into this election. And we saw the Republicans did very well in the states that they traditionally held. I mean, take a look at Texas. The margin, of course, is a little bit more narrow than it was in 2016. At this point, it's a 6-point margin of victory, but still, it's a 600,000 vote lead. Take a look at Florida, 3.5 point lead. This is one of the biggest margins we've seen any candidate win in Florida in a long time. In Ohio, we saw 53.2% to 45%, almost nearing an 8-point lead. In Iowa, we're almost nearing a 9-point lead. Why is this? Why are these the results that we're seeing from these red counties or these red states that a lot of people thought were going to be narrow or could even go to the Democrats? And I think we're going to see more of an impact when we look at the House map that flipped, the seats that were flipped. But generally speaking, in these red states, the Democrats and a lot of their movements, like the quote-unquote socialist movement, which that was one of the things the Republicans really attacked during this election. The defund the police movement, all of that really hit home to a lot of these voters in places like Florida, Texas, Iowa, and Ohio. And in certain cases, we saw Trump do better in Ohio and Iowa than he did in 2016. He did a lot better in Florida than he did in 2016. The margin in Texas did end up narrowing down, but generally speaking, in these states, we are seeing the president increase his lead. Now, where are the Democrats increasing their support? They're increasing it in the Rust Belt. And I mean, that's self-explanatory. I mean, that was a very small margin in 2016. However, to those voters, something like the pandemic might have been something that would have moved them a little bit more. And of course, if we take a look at the exit polls, which I'm not going to do this during this video, and I'm going to do that during a later video. However, taking a look at the exit polls that we have, beginning of the election night, we could tell that it was not going to be an easy night for the Democrats, or rather, easy election week. And there's states that were surprisingly close. I mean, Arizona or Nevada really fell 2.7% for Biden when he was expected to win by at least 3% or more. I mean, these races really ended up being very narrow. And again, what is something else that we're seeing from this map? Donald Trump was able to make inroads with African Americans and Hispanics all across the nation. Because keep in mind that if you take a look at voter demographics, white voters turning out during this election was 10% down from last election, putting in perspective. And Hispanic and Black voters were up. So even though Trump lost a very big group of his support, or a pretty considerable chunk of the white voter, which often more than not turn out to go vote for the Republicans. And in this case, he even lost some of those white voters to Biden. Those gains with the Hispanic community, for example, in Florida, or the Black community in other parts of the country, really helped him out. And I think, for example, that support amongst the Black community is truly what's helping the president hold on in North Carolina, where the race is narrowing up day in, day out, with around 1.3% margin of victory currently for the former for President Trump, or former Vice President Biden is behind. This is a state where, I mean, the Democrats really had hopes they could flip. Again, we still have 98% reporting, and this takes me and leads me into the states where we still do not have projections. So let's just start off with North Carolina. At this point in time, it's almost what 6 days after the election. We're nearing almost a whole week, and we still do not have a call from this race. 98% of the vote is in. They're still in counting votes. Now, what's a little bit not so encouraging for the Republicans is that they will keep this lead, at least at the margins they have now. I think essentially is that where are the votes missing? In one of the largest counties, 95% of the vote is only in. They have 5% to still count. In Buncombe County, this is another decently sized county in North Carolina, 92%. In Raleigh, 95% of the vote. In Greensboro, they have most of the votes counted there, but this is a big one. In Winston-Salem, a very big Democratic stronghold, we see at this point 89% of the vote missing. Now, can Biden go through and carry up the margins? I don't think so. I think we're going to see President Trump end up winning in North Carolina. But everything else on the map, it does not look too encouraging for the president. Let's take a look at Georgia. At this point, this has been one of the bigger surprises of this election. And I think it really comes down to a couple of things. Mostly that the Democrats were able to perform strongly in these Atlanta suburbs. In some cases, they were like a little bit closer, but generally speaking, a lot of these suburbs that traditionally just end up being more Republican, they really came out to vote for President Trump, or for former Vice President Biden. And that really is what narrowed down the margins. In addition to that, I mean, in some of these more rural counties, we didn't see Biden perform horribly. Considerably, he performed considerably better. And he was also able to bring up those margins in Atlanta, Fulton County, winning 72-26, or in DeKalb County, 83-15. So I think, just generally speaking, this is kind of a little bit of a stronger message for the Democrats. They were able to make inroads and get the voter turnout out in Georgia. Now, very interestingly, a lot of these people that ended up voting for Biden, I would say, and the difference right now is 10,000 votes. It's not that much, but there is people that ended up voting for Biden that did not vote Democratic down ballot. If you take a look at the Senate races, which I'm going to do another video on that pretty soon, you currently have in the statewide one where you have like only 2 candidates between David Perdue and between John Ossoff, and then you also have those more third-party candidates, but very small percentage of the vote. David Perdue currently leads. So I think this more in Georgia, it became more of a thing of Donald Trump's not that popular here. They like more traditional Republicans. And I think at this point in time, that's really what hurt the Republicans here. And I think if this ends up holding, which at this point in time, it looks like it might, that might be a very big embarrassing thing for the Republicans and President Trump. Now, going on to the last crucial swing state that hasn't been called, which at this point in time is not going to have a big impact on the election as the state of Pennsylvania has already been called. We're seeing here, for example, former Vice President Biden do very well in Maricopa County and take these southern counties and win them by a lot. So there's a couple things we also must understand here, that if we think about it, President Trump needed to bring up his margins in Yuma County, and he had to take all these counties with him. He didn't lose horribly in Maricopa County. As they've been counting votes, that margin has been narrowing down each and every hour, or when we ever get those votes coming in. However, I mean, at this point in time, that's what we currently have for Maricopa. But statewide level, when we think about it, where are the biggest votes missing, or percentage of the votes? In Cochise County, which is a Republican county, we're missing a lot of these Trump counties still have 95% reporting. They don't have all the full votes reporting. And this is La Paz County. Maybe a little bit less votes here, but it's still a considerable chunk of votes here. If these votes report, I think we might be seeing a very narrow race. And Arizona, a lot of Democrats thought this state was going to be a walk in the park. And truly it was not. And still with, I mean, a lot of votes to still be counted with, 2% in a state of over 3 million votes cast as of right now. Is it possible for Trump to win? Maybe it is, if he does very well with the outstanding vote. But I wouldn't say that, for example, right now that's the most likely outcome. And then the last state is the state of Alaska. Here, it becomes more a thing of, no, the state is not going to be contested. This state is probably going to end up going to President Trump. Now, what are we seeing here? That truly what ends up happening is that we still do have a lot of votes to be counted. So, I mean, Northern Alaska is where we have very ridiculously tiny amount of votes, 118, 117. We have nothing there. But in the bigger cities of Alaska, we have bigger amount of votes, 2,000 votes. It's not that much anyways. But generally speaking, in the bigger areas of Alaska, if you zoom in a little bit, we see again a lot of support for Trump. So you still have some Democratic areas still to report. Their vote is nowhere near done reporting in Alaska, but I mean at this point in time, it's looking like it will go to former to President Donald Trump. Now, taking a look at the swing states during this election, we saw that the Republicans held on to the more traditionally Republican ones, the ones that were kind of in the middle, like Arizona and Georgia. The Democrats are currently in the lead, and the Democrats truly took a big lead up in the Midwest. So overall, that's what gave Biden this election. And this election really was closer than a lot of people thought. I mean, on election, I think at least for a lot of Democrats, it was something that was very scary. It was a little bit not as reassuring that some of the races that they expected to be carrying by a lot were that close. And I mean, taking a look at Nevada, I mean, that's somewhat of an embarrassment for the Democrats. They should have been able to build upon Hillary Clinton's lead by a lot more. Take a look at Florida. That's a very big embarrassment for the Democrats. And again, this kind of assures us that Florida is headed towards the path of becoming a more traditionally Republican state. And we are seeing the Republicans, they truly did not do that bad during this election. We actually saw Democrats not do so great in the Senate. They gained a seat, but again, it depends. It's also a seat that we're almost bound to gain, or like a net gain of one. In the House, the Democrats did horrible. They lost seats, now having one of the smallest majorities in the history of the United States Congress, at least when it comes in the last 40 years. They have one of the smallest majorities. The Democrats, what really hurt them overall, and I think we've seen a lot of candidates like Elaine Luria or Abigail Spanberger in Virginia in one of the congressional districts say that truly, and I think I agree with his message, that one thing that screwed a lot of these Democrats that are a lot more moderate over was the Democrats, in generally speaking, the defund the police movement, the socialism and that general branding of the party, and very big notable members like AOC and Bernie Sanders now taking control of the whole image of the party. That really hurt Democrats in areas like Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, and Texas. And I think without that message, I think the Democrats could have had a landslide during this election. Again, this election is nowhere near a landslide. If anything, the Democrats, generally speaking, looking at down ballot races, completely did horrible. And this election was a very interesting one to watch. As we move forward, we're going to start getting more results from North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, and we might be able to make a projection pretty soon. However, at this point in time, Joe Biden is now President-elect Biden, and America has made history picking Kamala Harris as their first female vice president, as well as the first person of color to serve as vice president. So I guess that's a very big accomplishment, at least historically, for our country. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please give me a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and goodbye.